Welcome, everybody. This is Midland's Mediation Center. Once again, we are joining you all live to talk about why I vote. And today we are excited to have Mary Bryan here. Mary Bryan is a retired attorney, mediator, and teacher. She's a trained mediator through the South Carolina Bar and other groups for over 20 years. She is a gem in our community, has been an amazing person who is a facilitator of justice as well as a peace builder in our community. She cares about people making good decisions together. This is what government should do, and that is to make these great choices. So help me welcome Mary Bryan here today. Thank you so much for being here, Mary. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. So our conversation is around why I vote. We believe that voting is important to our democracy, and a lot of times people don't understand the value of the vote. And so we're trying to get different perspectives from different people to share why do they vote. And so we would love to hear from you as to why you vote.
Cabrina, I thought about this when you sent your questions, and I have a 3-word answer, and that is voting is power. And I remember in school and from my parents and just growing up, there was no question about whether to vote. You voted. And I think in a way that makes you not realize quite how important it is until you get older and you learn more about what's going on. The first time I voted, I was going to college in Georgia, and there was no way for students to vote absentee. Most of us didn't have cars. We had one friend with a car, and 4 of us South Carolina girls got in my friend Sarah's car, and we drove home to Columbia to vote. At the time, it was LBJ, first vote. And that feeling of being in that voting booth and nobody else knows who you're voting for, it's your choice, was just exhilarating. It was also wonderful to be with all the people. You know, there were people in our neighborhood that I knew. So it's a community experience too. This year is different with the pandemic and all the different ways to vote, but I think it is something that gives us a voice, and that there's just so many things that you can say about why it's important.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was amazing. LBJ, that is so awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. So the second question that we asked to give a scope of your values and how those values were shaped through your family or your community. What were you taught growing up as it related to voting?
Well, I was taught, for one thing, that the very beginning of the United States was about having a voice in government. You know, you hear the stories about taxation without representation and people throwing the tea in the ocean, the Boston Tea Party, but people were being asked to pay taxes, but they didn't have any say about whether they should pay taxes or what that money was used for. And that was, there were probably many reasons. It was about people having self-government, but it was really about voting. And what I learned over the years was how everybody didn't vote at first. And it has taken years, and to this day, we still have to protect that right. But I learned the things most of us learned in school, which were incomplete, but a lot of good things. But I think in our country, somebody worked very hard for your right to vote, whoever you are. You know, when it started, it was white men with property. And then I think Black men, although they really weren't able to exercise the right to vote, they had it by law. And then white women, and then Black women. And every time, groups of people had to really go out and kind of get on the front lines in terms of speaking out and influencing the present government in locally and across the country for the federal government to allow people the right to vote. So I learned those things in bits and pieces and learn more all the time. Realize things I hadn't heard about.
Yeah, when we were putting this together, one thing I discovered is the indigenous people of the United States, that even though that right was given in 1870 to Black men to vote, it wasn't given to natives, and they weren't recognized as citizens until 1924, which is 4 years after women were given the right to vote. So, and then people with disabilities didn't come really to make it accessible for them to vote. Wasn't until 1970. So
yeah,
this whole thing, people are still fighting to make sure every citizen has that right to vote. And so we can't slow down now. We got to keep fighting, you know.
And that it's a free right, you know, that you don't have to answer a bunch of questions about the Constitution or count how many somethings are in a jar or own property or pay a tax to be able to vote. You need to just be able to vote. And the laws about absentee ballot voting are very important too, as we know this year.
Yeah. So the last question is, when we think about this whole thing of voting, how do we encourage other people to vote? I mean, other people that don't see the value in voting, other people that have the argument about, well, my vote really don't matter because of the electoral college. How do we convince them that even though there's this process out there, your vote matter? It brings volume to the issues.
Yeah, right. Or people who say, I don't like any of them. You know, doesn't matter. I think that's kind of a hard thing. I think part of it is learning, is education. There are a lot of things people don't know about, even about how government works. I don't think we're doing a very good job teaching people about how our institutions work. You know, the courts, the president, the Congress, all the areas in local government. But it goes down to, do you have clean water? Do you have water? Do you know, what's happening in your community? Because votes affect, at the local level, affect those very basic needs that people have. I think one thing that might help is peer pressure. It's just, you know, maybe asking people, are your neighbors voting? Is your sister voting? Are your children voting? Are your parents voting? Are your friends voting? Or saying they are voting. Why don't you get together and go to vote? Go down, and the mediation center is going to have food trucks and BJs. I really don't know. I think another thing is a lot of people just try literally to help people get to the polls, help them get to a place where they can vote, help them find a way to look at the ticket, who's running for everything.
Yeah, the ballot.
Yeah, so they have an idea of what they're going to see, and they feel like they will know what to do. And I know you were talking about a video to walk people through the process of filling out an absentee ballot. And so if people are worried about it, they're really saying, well, I haven't voted and I don't really know, I'm not even sure how to do it. So I do think that there are a lot of good groups out there helping people. The League of Women Voters has done so much. And that started around the time of getting the Vote for Women. And they have broadened to all kinds of issues, and they have a lot of very accessible information about voting. They're not the only people. But I think the main thing, if people understand how to vote, if they can figure out how to get there, how to do it, if they can see what it looks like when it comes up on the voting machine, that will make them more comfortable. And then just kind of going back to the notion of power, that voting is your voice. If you aren't, if you don't like what you see going on in your community or in our country, find out about the people, check 3 or 4 different sources, and vote for the one you like the best. Voting is the best thing we have. It is not perfect, but it's the best. It's the best exercise of individual power that we have.
Yeah, I like that. Voting is power. So use your superpower. Yes.
Yes, right. And tell your friends, and
Yeah. Thank you, Mary, so
Right.
much for sharing. Is there anything else you want to leave with this audience here today?
Well, just that it is very, very important. And I think instead of being discouraged about all the difficult things that are going on now, from the pandemic to what we see around us in government, I think instead of being discouraged, we need to go vote. We need to go vote.
Yes, we need to go vote. So thank you, Mary, for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. And to all of you that are listening, thank you so much for joining us here today for our live conversation of why I vote. So as we close in each session, just remember, vote, vote, and vote. It will make a difference. So thank you so much